Chapter 1. London. Nobody could remember exactly when or how long the unidentified man had been waiting in the hospital lobby. It was a busy night, and he never checked in at the desk or asked for assistance. It wasn't until he fell off the chair and laid unconscious on the floor that anybody really paid much attention to him. His long trench coat had covered up the gunshot wound to his stomach, but his white shirt had now turned red, thanks to blood soaking into it for a few hours. They immediately took him to the emergency room and put him on the operating table. The doctors needed to take the bullet out and stop the bleeding as soon as possible. After an hour of surgery, the doctors successfully removed the bullet. Luckily for the man, no major organs had been damaged, other than a very minor graze to part of his liver. Once he was stitched up, they wheeled him to the 5th floor and a private room for his recovery. A couple of hours after the surgery, the man had awoken in a considerable amount of pain. He was holding his side and feeling where the bandages now were. He grimaced as he looked around at his surroundings, not remembering how he got there. A few minutes later, a nurse came back in to check on him. "Hey," the smiling nurse greeted him. "Nice to finally see you awake." "Hi. How are you feeling?" "I've had better days." "Yeah, I bet. My name's Kelly. Can I get you anything?" "Yeah, my release papers." She laughed. "That might take a little while." "I can't stay here," he said. "Why? You in some sort of trouble? Is that what the gunshot was from? Somebody after you? I can get the police here for you." "No, don't call the police." Kelly looked at him a little strangely. The police would be there anyway, but usually the people that came in there that didn't want the police involved were in most cases running from them. Not that it mattered to her and how she treated the patient. Law-breaking or law-abiding, she did her duties the same way no matter what. "You didn't have any identification on you when you came in," Kelly said. "What's your name?" The man thought about it for a minute, knowing what would happen if he revealed his true name. At least the one he was going by now. If he gave that, his name would ping up in somebody's computer and they would come back and try to finish the job. It's John. John Smith." Kelly raised her eyebrows as she looked at him over the top of the clipboard that she was writing on. She knew it was a fake name right away, but being an experienced nurse of over 10 years, knew not to take issue with it. If that was the name he wanted to use, that was his business. "John Smith, huh? That's what you're going to go with?" She scribbled on his notes, then hung the clipboard over the end of the bed. "Yeah." "You remember how you got here?" No, not really." "Apparently you were waiting in the lobby and you suddenly passed out. Nobody could remember when you came in or if somebody brought you in."
"I came in on my own."
"So you remember? Anybody you want me to call to let them know you're here?" She knew what his answer would be.
"No."
"Friends, family, anyone?"
"I don't have any friends or family here."
Kelly stayed with him for a few more minutes, asking him some more questions that he mostly evaded. She checked his vital signs, all of which seemed to be okay. As she wrapped things up, she let Smith know that a doctor would be in to see him in a few minutes. The doctor wound up walking in about 10 minutes later. "Mr. The doctor picked up the chart and examined it. "Smith, I'm Dr. Carlson. How are you feeling?"
"Fantastic."
"Well, considering what happened, I'd say you're a very lucky man. We removed the bullet. Luckily, it didn't hit any major organs. Well, it did hit a very tiny piece of your liver, but that was such a small piece it really wasn't much at all. Most people with a gunshot to their stomach or abdomen don't fare quite as well as you."
"No kidding."
"So what's my recovery timeline?" Smith said. "You should be up and about and out of here in 2 or 3 days, I'd say."
"Long-term effects?"
"Difficult to say right now. Full recovery will be anywhere from 3 to 6 months if you don't do anything too strenuous. No climbing mountains or obstacle courses or anything like that. You never truly know whether someone will ever get back to 100% after something like this. Some people will get to 80 or 90%, and that's as far as they'll ever go. Now, you seem like you're in decent shape, so I would imagine you'll get there. If not, then pretty close to it." After Smith's conversation with the doctor, He worried about what might happen next. He knew that the law required the hospital to notify the police of a gunshot injury. Since gunshot wounds were not very common in England, Smith knew the police would be there soon and with questions he didn't want to answer. He hit the button for the nurse's station to get Kelly. She came in just a few seconds. She poked her head around the door. "What can I do for you?" "Is there any way I can get a shirt or something? Kind of cold just laying here like this." "I should be able to find something. Give me a couple of minutes." "Thank you," Smith smiled. He was going to have to speed up his recovery time and exit the hospital sooner than the doctors had planned. He couldn't risk the police asking questions and poking around. It only took 5 minutes for Kelly to return with a plain black shirt. "This okay?" She held it up for him as she walked in. "Should do fine, thank you." "Got you a large? You don't quite look like a medium." "Just my size," Smith said, slowly putting the shirt on. "Better?" "Yes. Any idea on when the police will be here?" "The police?" "Yeah. They're coming, right? Gunshot wounds have to be reported, right?" A little taken aback by the questions, Kelly wondered why he was inquiring. It seemed strange to her. "I believe they were just called 30 minutes ago. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Just wanted to know when to expect company. Could you give me just a minute or two's notice when they get here? I hate surprises." "Sure thing." It took a few minutes for him to come up with a plan, but Smith knew anything was better than staying there. He unhooked all his monitors and gingerly got off the bed, walking over to the window where his trench coat was draped over a chair. Just as he was putting it on, Kelly came rushing into the room. "What do you think you're doing?" She stood in front of him, hands on hips. "I'm afraid I have to go." "Oh, no, you don't. You're going to lay right back down," she said, gripping his arm. Smith resisted and gently removed her hand from his bicep. "Thank you for patching me up and everything, but staying here isn't an option." Kelly objected again, but he shrugged off her attempts to keep him there. Smith walked out of the room and down the hall, right past a team of doctors and nurses, all of whom were wondering what was going on. "You still need attention." Kelly stayed 2 steps behind him. "You've done enough," Smith said, not even bothering to turn around. He kept walking until he found an elevator, Kelly running after him. Once the doors opened, he stepped in and pushed for the main floor, Kelly just barely getting in before the doors closed again. "What do you think you're doing?" Kelly said, watching the brightly lit numbers count down. "Leaving." "Can I ask why?" "Already told you, can't stay here." "Who are you running from?" "You don't want to know." "The police or a criminal?" "Neither." "What else is there?" "There are people looking for me more powerful than either of those. And once they know I'm here, they'll come looking for me," Smith said. "We can try to protect you while you heal." "Afraid not. Not from these people." "How do you know?" "'Cause I used to be one of them." "Used to be?" "Up until last night." The elevator doors opened, and Smith walked out, Kelly following for a few steps. Eventually, she stopped without saying another word, knowing that there was nothing else she could do to prevent him from leaving. A couple of police officers entered the hospital and walked right past Smith on his way to the exit. As soon as he passed the officers, Smith looked back at Kelly, wondering if she'd informed them of his presence. Kelly looked at the officers but let them pass by her without a word, watching them get into the elevator. Smith looked at the nurse and gave a smile, nodding slightly as if to say thank you to her. "Take care of yourself," she said. Philadelphia. It had been 6 months since his shooting, and he figured he'd spent enough time laying low. After arriving at Philadelphia International Airport, Smith had just picked up his bags and started walking through the corridor when he stopped suddenly. There was a man standing there, holding a placard with his name on it. John Smith. There was a second man standing next to the one with the sign. He sighed, resigned to the fact that they had finally found him, ready to submit to what had started in London. He knew it would be futile to resist, knowing that the agents were watching from several locations. He took a quick glance around to see if he could spot any guns with him in his sights, though he couldn't pick anyone out. The man put his hand out, indicating to Smith that he should follow him. Ready to accept whatever was coming, he followed the man over to a restaurant. Smith was instructed to wait there while the man walked over to a table where another gentleman was sitting. Sitting with his back to them and dressed in a nice black suit, Smith couldn't make out the identity of the person. From behind, it didn't appear to be anyone that he'd ever met before. The man waved Smith over to have a seat with the gentleman that was sitting, who never turned around to look at him. Smith walked leisurely over to the table, not keen to hear whatever the person had to say to him. Smith sat down across from the well-dressed man, still unsure who the hell he was. He wasn't the type of person Smith expected to see if he was ever caught again. The man was eating tomato soup, but stopped when Smith sat. "Mr. Smith, it's a pleasure to meet you," the man said, putting his hand out. Smith wasn't sure about shaking hands, but decided to do so anyway. "Wish I could say the same to you, but you seem to have the advantage of actually knowing who I am. I can't say the same about you." "You can call me David," the man said in a quiet, unassuming voice. "Got a last name?" "Just David will do for now." "How'd you know my name?" "Which one?" "Either." "I have ways. Though I would think a man such as yourself would be able to come up with a better alias than Smith." I was in a hurry. "You work for Centurion?" Smith said. "You can put your mind at ease, Mr. Smith. I can assure you I'm not with the CIA or any other government agency for that matter. I'm not here to harm you in any way." "Then how do you know who I am? How'd you know I would be here?" "There are many things I'm aware of that I probably shouldn't. That's something we can discuss another time." "What do you want from me?" Smith shifted slightly on the hard plastic seat. "Well, since you seem to be in transition at the moment with regards to your work, I wanted to offer you employment." "Doing what?" "Similar to your last line of work," David said. "Only hopefully without all the killing." "Listen, I'm not sure what this is all about, but you seem to talk without really telling me anything. Why don't you just tell me what you really want?" David opened his mouth to start talking, but hesitated as he tried to formulate what he wanted to say. "My goal, my aim, what I hope to accomplish, is to prevent bad things happening to good people. To do that, I need someone I can trust, who has your particular set of skills. Bad things happen to good people all the time. You can't prevent it. But you can. I can. And if you choose to help me in this pursuit, then we can." "What are you, a detective or something?" David grimaced. "Not quite." "Well, then I'm not quite interested," Smith said, standing up. "Am I free to go?" He looked at the two men sitting a few tables away. "If you like," David nodded. "But I think it's safe to say that if I could find you, I'm pretty sure Centurion would be able to as well." "Let me worry about that." "What you need is a friend who can help you in that regard." "I'm all out of friends. Besides, you look like you should be working in a library or something. I doubt you can help me against Centurion." "Looks can be deceiving, Mr. Smith. For instance, it's a good thing you left the hospital in London when you did. Not only did you manage to just barely avoid the police, but Centurion agents came about 2 hours later to check on the man with a gunshot wound to his stomach who had no ID on him." Smith sat again, wondering how he knew all that. "How do you get all that information if you don't work for Centurion? You're not British, so you're not MI6 either." "Let's just say I'm good with computers and finding information that others can't." "Which means you're either a hacker that's on some type of government radar, or you've worked for one of the agencies before. So which is it?" "A little bit of both, I would say." David picked up his spoon. "I'd also like to let you know that it's a good thing you had this unscheduled layover here. There were several agents waiting for you at your original destination down in Orlando. I'm quite sure they would not be giving you the courtesy of this conversation we're having." He dipped his spoon in his bowl and slurped a mouthful of soup. Intrigued, Smith was now interested in finding out more, though he was still suspicious. 6 years in the CIA had that effect on people. "If you want me to join this crusade that you've got going on, Then you're going to have to spill a whole lot more information, like exactly who you are, what you do, and how you get all this information you have. You seem to know everything about me, but I know nothing about you. For all I know, you're just setting me up for a hit later. I assure you, Mr. Smith, that is not the case. I'm sure you can understand my suspicions. I can. Fine, David said. After a little deliberation, he continued. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. How I get my information? Well, I should keep that a little more guarded. At least until I know you're as invested in this as I am. I'm all ears. You can start by telling me your name. My name is David Jones. Jones? You gave me crap about Smith and you're using a name like Jones? I'm not supposed to be as creative as you with this alias thing. You should be better at it. It is an alias? Yes. So why do you need an alias? Jones pushed his bowl of soup aside for a moment as he thought of where to begin. I, at one point, worked for the NSA. I had the highest level clearance as an analyst and consultant. Okay. At least until several months ago. I'd become disillusioned with the agency over the way they process and act on the information that they acquire. In what way? As you are well aware, the NSA keeps tabs on everyone. They have mountains upon mountains of data and information, most of which the public is never aware of. In addition to trying to track terrorist activity, as well as gaining foreign intelligence, they track everything that normal people do. They have access to emails, phone calls, voice messages, almost anything you can think of, they are privy to, Jones said. And you take issue with this? Not in its basic context. They're looking for items in reference to national security, and I believe in that regard nothing should be left to chance. So what do you have a problem with then? That they have access to millions of documents, emails, and the rest that they do nothing with. Normal, everyday people that have real problems whose lives may be in danger, and the NSA does nothing to help them. And if the NSA were to act on that information or forward it to local authorities, that information couldn't be used in court or else it would be learned where that information came from, Smith said. Jones nodded his head. And there'd be a public outcry, more than there already is about the use of the NSA's methods in acquiring such information. And how do you propose on helping these so-called normal people? I've devised a program where I have access to some of that information, Jones said, sliding his bowl back in front of him. You're hacking the NSA? Jones scooped up soup as he considered his answer. Well, I guess you could put it that way. I prefer to think of it as piggybacking to get the proper information that I need. Do they know this yet? Not that I can tell. It's only a matter of time, however, that they do. But by the time they've located the source, the signal will be bounced around all over the country. I'm not particularly worried about them finding me, at least not yet. What I'm more concerned with is acting upon the information that we acquire. Just what information is that? What kind of help do these people need? And how are you finding the people who need it? Smith said, eyeing the bowl of soup. He was hungry after his flight, and it smelled great. The NSA has software programs that scan every email sent, every phone call made, every voicemail, every post on Facebook, every tweet on Twitter that looks for certain words and phrases to indicate potential problems. Now, what they currently do is, if it's related to terrorism or foreign intelligence, they act upon it. If it's just Mary Sue afraid for her life from an abusive boyfriend, they ignore that information and file it away. They don't care whether this normal everyday woman who's just trying to get by lives or dies. I do. I want to make a difference. You can't save the entire world, Jones. Trying to is a futile effort. Take it from me, I've been all over it. I know that. I'm not trying to save the world. I've no illusions about trying to change the planet or how its people look at each other. I just want to make a difference on my end of it. So what do you need me for? Because I can't do the things you can do. You have a particular set of skills that I can't duplicate. I am good at certain things, computers, finding information, things of that sort. I've always been in the background doing what needs to be done. What I need is a partner who is good in the field, who can do the things you do.
What makes you think I'm your guy?
I've read your file. I know everything about you. You went into the military straight out of high school, became a member of Delta Force, spent 8 years in the military, then when your enlistment ended, wound up at the CIA. I know you've been there the last 6 years, the last 4 of which you were in a top-secret project called Centurion, in which you were a foreign assassin. I also know that Centurion knew you were growing tired of your role in the agency and were seeking to get out, but with all you know about the organization, couldn't just let you leave and sought to terminate you in London 6 months ago.
Well, then you also know that most of the people that come across my desk have a tendency of ending up dead, Smith said.
Jones shifted his eyes back and forth. That is something we would have to work on.
It sounds like you have a noble cause and I'm all for it, but I'm not sure I'm your guy.
On the contrary, I believe you're the perfect guy. Jones swallowed more soup.
I'm a little set in my ways. Violence tends to follow me around. I'm not a wallflower who believes in turning the other cheek.
That's where we could benefit each other. I've read your files and reports. You certainly don't run from a fight, and at times seem to embrace it. But it seems like you do it for the right reasons. You don't especially like killing, but you will if you have to.
What are you looking to do? Save people? Send them to the authorities, jail, what?
Whatever the situation calls for, Mr. Smith, Jones replied. Whatever the situation calls for.
I have a feeling you're looking for someone who's going to swoop in and save the day. Get the girl and leave the bad guy tied up and waiting for the police to arrive to take him to the slammer. That ain't me. It's not how I operate.
I'm fully aware of that. And I'm not naive enough to think everything we work on will be simple and easy with no gray moral boundaries to cross. I would prefer to do things as quietly and non-violently as possible. In saying that, there will be times when I'll disagree with your methods, and I'm sure there'll be times when I think you're being too violent for the task at hand, and I'll be right and you'll be wrong. Just like I'm equally sure there'll be times when I think that, and you'll be right and I'll be wrong, and that's exactly what the situation calls for, and I just can't see it. But I believe that together we'll complement each other. We won't agree on everything, no, but I think we could be an effective team, if you're of the mind to be one.
Jones stood up, putting on his hat and coat. He motioned to his 2 bodyguards that he was done, and they walked over to him.
Where are you going? Smith was surprised he was leaving. I have other business to attend to.
I thought we were going over your business.
It's a lot to take in, I know. I really wasn't expecting to go into so many details with you on our first encounter. I had merely planned to make this an introductory meeting. But things rarely go as planned, don't they? Jones said.
How will I contact you if I agree to this venture of yours?
Don't worry, Mr. Smith. I'll contact you. Jones reached into his pocket and took out a piece of paper, putting it down on the table in front of Smith.
What's this?
Smith smoothed out the slip as he read it. I took the liberty of arranging accommodation for you at a nearby hotel. That's your check-in information and room number.
What makes you think I'll go there?
Curiosity. If you're interested in this operation, I assume you'll be there when I check in with you tomorrow. If you're not, then you're not. And I wish you well in your future endeavors. Smith sat there for a few moments, watching the stranger walk away, followed by his 2 bodyguards. Once they were out of sight, he glanced down at the piece of paper given to him and thought about the offer. Though he still wasn't sold on the idea, he was intrigued. It would interrupt his plans in Orlando, but Smith knew what he was planning down there wasn't likely to go over well. Jones wanted Smith to help with whatever little crusade he was planning. But if he was as good with computers as he said, and as he appeared, Jones could help Smith as well.